At 08:15 hours on November 7, 1944, Captain Robert Hendricks stood in a muddy field 3 miles outside Saint-Lô, France, watching the 14th Sherman tank in 3 weeks burn. Black smoke poured from the engine deck in thick columns that stained the overcast Norman sky. Orange flames climbed 20 feet high, fed by high-octane aviation gasoline that burned hotter than any fuel should burn in an armored vehicle. The crew made it out. 5 men scrambling through hatches. Driver first, pulling himself up through the narrow opening with his clothes already smoking. Assistant driver second, crawling backward through the fighting compartment. Gunner, loader, and commander tumbling out of the turret hatch in a desperate tangle of limbs and equipment. All 5 hit the ground running, stumbled, fell, got up, ran another 30 yards before collapsing in the mud. Hendricks counted them from 50 yards away. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all alive. Faces blackened with soot, uniforms torn, hands blistered, but breathing. The previous 2 crews hadn't been that lucky. Sergeant William Morrison and his gunner died on October 3rd. Lieutenant David Chen's entire crew burned on October 27th. This crew survived because they had 14 seconds instead of 12. 2 extra seconds. The difference between life and death. The smell reached Hendricks on the wind. Burning gasoline, scorched rubber, superheated metal, paint vaporizing off armor plate, oil cooking into black smoke, and underneath it all, the distinctive stench of a Wright R-975 radial engine consuming itself. He'd smelled it 14 times now. Each time, the same sequence. Engine takes damage, fuel ignites, crew evacuates or dies. The tank burns until nothing combustible remains. The tank commander walked toward Hendricks, a staff sergeant whose name Hendricks didn't know. The man's face was streaked black. His hands shook. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare that came from nearly dying. He stopped 3 feet from Hendricks and spoke. "Engine fire, sir. Fuel line ruptured. We had maybe 10 seconds. Hendricks pulled out his field notebook, wrote down the hull number, 3-Charlie-9, wrote down the time, 08:15, wrote down the cause. Mechanical failure leading to fuel system ignition. No enemy contact, no combat damage. Just the Sherman M4 doing what Sherman M4s did best in the autumn of 1944. They burned. The Sherman had one fatal flaw that was killing American tankers faster than German 88mm guns. The Wright R-975 radial engine ran on 100-octane aviation gasoline, the same fuel that powered P-51 Mustang fighters at 30,000 feet. The same fuel that kept B-17 flying fortresses aloft over Germany. High-octane, volatile, absolutely perfect for aircraft that needed maximum power at high altitude. Absolutely wrong for ground vehicles designed to absorb hits and keep fighting. The fuel system was a death trap. Fuel lines ran through the engine compartment exposed to heat, shrapnel, and penetrating rounds. The carburetor sat directly above the engine cylinders, where any spark could reach fuel vapor. The main fuel tank mounted against the interior hull wall, with minimal armor protection. The entire system was designed for peacetime reliability, not combat survivability. One hit was all it took. One 88mm armor-piercing round punching through the rear deck. One piece of shrapnel severing a fuel line, one spark in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then physics took over. Gasoline vapor mixed with oxygen, found an ignition source, exploded into flame. Fire spread through the enclosed engine compartment in seconds. Temperature rose to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in 30 seconds. At that temperature, aluminum melted, rubber liquefied, steel glowed red, human flesh cooked. American tankers had given the Sherman a nickname that spread through every armored division in Europe: the Ronson. Named after Ronson cigarette lighters, whose advertising slogan promised "lights first time, every time." British tankers called it the Tommy Cooker. German panzer crews didn't bother with special names. They just aimed for the engine deck and waited for the fire. The statistics told the story with brutal clarity. The 3rd Armored Division had lost 147 Sherman tanks to engine fires between D-Day and November 7, 1944. Not fires caused by enemy action. Fires that started after the combat damage. Fires that killed crews who survived the initial hit. Most tanks took damage that was mechanically repairable. The German round penetrated armor, damaged components, maybe wounded one crew member. But then the gasoline ignited and everyone died. Standard procedure after engine compartment penetration was immediate evacuation. Crews drilled on it constantly. Hit to the engine, everyone out. 12 seconds maximum. 12 seconds to get 5 men through hatches designed for comfortable access during training exercises. The driver had to release his controls, unlock his hatch, pull himself up through an opening barely wide enough for his shoulders. The assistant driver had to abandon the bow machine gun, crawl backward through the fighting compartment, squeeze past the transmission housing, climb up through the turret. The gunner, loader, and commander went through turret hatches if they could move, if the turret wasn't jammed, if they weren't already wounded from the penetrating round. 12 seconds. Sometimes crews got 14 if the fuel pooled before igniting. Sometimes they got 8 if vapor pockets formed near hot metal. The variation didn't matter much. What mattered was that 5 men had to escape a steel box filling with fire before the heat became lethal. American tank crews in Europe had a 62% survival rate in their first combat engagement. That dropped to 53% by their 3rd engagement. By their 5th combat action, survival rate was 48%. Coin flip odds. Engine fires accounted for 34% of all Sherman losses in the European theater between June and November 1944. Not ammunition explosions. Not main gun penetrations into the fighting compartment. Engine fires that started in the rear deck and spread forward before crews could escape. The Sherman was mechanically excellent in every other way. It started reliably in sub-freezing temperatures. The engine ran for 500 hours between overhauls. Maintenance crews could swap out a complete engine in 8 hours with proper equipment. The suspension handled French mud, Belgian forests, and German hills without excessive failures. The transmission rarely broke. Track life exceeded expectations. As a mechanical system, the Sherman was sound, but it burned. And burning killed crews who should have survived. Temperature inside a burning Sherman engine compartment reached 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit within 30 seconds of fuel ignition. The fighting compartment, separated from the engine by a firewall, reached 600 degrees within 60 seconds. At 600 degrees, air temperature alone caused burns to exposed skin. At 1,800 degrees, metal components melted and dripped. Crews who didn't evacuate within 15 seconds of ignition never made it out. The smoke was too thick, the heat too intense, the pain too overwhelming. They died inside their tanks. Hendricks had filed 14 incident reports since October 3rd. Each report detailed the engine fire, the crew casualties, the fuel system failure. Each report recommended modifications: shield the fuel lines, relocate the fuel tank, install fire suppression systems. Each report went up the chain of command to 3rd Armored Division headquarters, then to 1st Army headquarters, then to Ordnance Department Technical Services. Each response came back identical. Tank performs within design specifications. No field modifications authorized without Ordnance Department approval. Approval process requires engineering analysis, testing, and procurement changes. Estimated timeline, 18 to 24 months. Within design specifications meant the tank burned exactly as the engineers in Detroit had designed it to burn. Those engineers never expected Shermans to take direct hits and keep fighting. They designed for rapid mass production, for ease of manufacture, for shipping efficiency. Survivability after penetration wasn't in the specifications. The Army had accepted the Sherman knowing its limitations, knowing crews would burn, accepting it as the cost of fielding enough tanks to overwhelm German armor through numerical superiority. But Hendricks kept writing reports because he signed maintenance logs every morning. Logs that said tanks were mechanically sound. Logs that said everything worked correctly. Logs for tanks whose crews died in fires that afternoon. The first crew Hendricks lost was Sergeant William Morrison's, October 3rd, 1944. Morrison was 24 years old, from Tulsa, Oklahoma. His crew had been in theater 6 weeks. They'd landed at Normandy on June 8th, 2 days after D-Day, fought through the hedgerows, survived the Falaise Gap, pushed into Belgium, then took an 88mm round through the right engine deck during a reconnaissance patrol near Aachen. The round penetrated cleanly, entered the rear armor, passed through the engine compartment, exited the opposite side. Textbook penetration. The engine was destroyed, but the crew was intact. No one wounded by the round itself. Morrison called for recovery over the battalion net. His voice was calm, professional. He reported the hit, requested tow, said his crew was buttoning up to wait for recovery. Then the fuel ignited. Morrison's tank went from disabled to burning in 4 seconds. The crew had 11 seconds from ignition to catastrophic fire spread. 3 men made it out. Morrison and his gunner, Corporal Thomas Reed, didn't. They died in the fire. Recovery crews found their bodies the next day when the hull cooled enough to approach. Hendricks had to identify them, had to sign the paperwork, had to inventory their personal effects for shipment home. Hendricks had signed Morrison's maintenance log that morning, 0630 hours. Pre-combat inspection, oil pressure, normal. Fuel system, no leaks detected. Engine timing, within specifications. Track tension, correct. The tank was mechanically perfect, but Morrison burned anyway because high-octane gasoline doesn't care about maintenance schedules. Captain Robert Hendricks was 31 years old. He was a maintenance officer in the 3rd Armored Division, not a combat engineer, not a tank commander, not an Ordnance Department technical specialist. His job was keeping vehicles operational. He commanded a maintenance company of 63 men who performed repairs, replaced components, and kept the division's tanks running. Before the war, Hendricks lived in Waterloo, Iowa. He'd studied mechanical engineering at Iowa State University. Graduated in 1935 during the Depression, when engineering degrees didn't guarantee employment. But John Deere Manufacturing Company was hiring. They needed engineers who understood agricultural equipment, who could design tractors for Iowa farms, where breakdowns during harvest meant financial ruin. Hendricks got hired to work on heavy-duty tractor engines. His specialty became diesel engines. Big, slow, reliable diesels that ran 20 hours straight pulling plows through clay soil. Engines built for farmers who needed reliability over performance. Who needed engines that survived abuse because replacement costs could bankrupt a family. Diesel engines were different from gasoline engines, heavier, less powerful, per cubic inch of displacement, slower to accelerate. But they had critical advantages. They were more fuel efficient under sustained load, more reliable during continuous operation. And most importantly, diesel fuel didn't explode. You could expose diesel to open flame and it burned slowly. Hit a diesel tank with a hammer and nothing happened. Try that with gasoline and you'd need a hospital. Hendricks spent 6 years at John Deere designing engines that never caught fire. Then, Pearl Harbor happened. He enlisted in January 1942. The Army saw his engineering degree and assigned him to ordnance. 6 months at Fort Knox, learning armor maintenance. By June 1943, he was a captain commanding a maintenance company in England. By June 1944, he was in France watching tanks burn. What made Hendricks different was simple. He thought like a farmer, not a soldier. Farmers couldn't afford equipment failures during harvest. One broken tractor during wheat season could destroy a year's income. So farmers demanded engines that survived. That took abuse. That didn't quit when you needed them most. And farmers used diesel because it didn't burn. On November 4, 1944, Hendricks was inspecting the division salvage yard. Rows of destroyed vehicles waiting to be stripped for parts. Most were Shermans. Some were half-tracks. A few were captured German vehicles kept for intelligence assessment. Hendricks walked past a Sherman with its engine bay completely burned out. Hull number 2-Bravo-4. The crew had died in the fire 3 days earlier. The engine compartment was black with soot. Melted components hung from mounting brackets. The fuel tank was a twisted, ruptured shell. Next to it sat a captured German agricultural tractor, a Lanz Bulldog, single-cylinder hot bulb diesel, crude, simple, built for farmers. The tractor was still operational despite taking .50 caliber machine gun fire during capture. Hendricks could see bullet holes punched through the engine block. 2 holes in the cylinder head. But someone had started it yesterday. It ran. Hendricks opened both engine compartments, looked at the destroyed Sherman Wright R-975, looked at the damaged Lanz diesel. The comparison was obvious. The Wright was a precision aircraft engine adapted for tank use. 9 cylinders, complex carburetor, high-octane gasoline. When damaged, it burned completely. The Lanz was a primitive farm engine. 1 cylinder, simple injection pump, diesel fuel. It survived combat damage and kept running. That's when Hendricks had the idea that would violate every regulation in the Army maintenance manual. What if he replaced the Sherman's gasoline engine with a diesel? The Lanz Bulldog diesel was too large. Hendricks measured it 3 times to be certain. The single-cylinder engine displaced 850 cubic inches. The Sherman engine bay could accommodate maybe 600 cubic inches maximum without major structural modifications. The mounting points were wrong. The drive shaft alignment was impossible. The Lanz would never fit. But the principle was sound. Diesel fuel didn't explode like gasoline. A diesel engine could take combat damage and leak fuel without creating a fireball. The problem wasn't the idea. The problem was finding the right diesel engine. Hendricks knew diesel engines, had designed them for 6 years at John Deere. The Caterpillar D17000 diesel was close to the right size. 6 cylinders, 425 cubic inches displacement, used in Caterpillar D7 bulldozers. The Corps of Engineers had 63 D7 dozers operating across Normandy, building roads, clearing rubble, pushing earth for defensive positions. Each dozer powered by a D17000 diesel rated at 95 horsepower at 1,650 revolutions per minute. The Sherman's Wright R-975 radial produced 400 horsepower at 2,400 revolutions per minute. Massive difference in output. But the Sherman weighed 33 tons. It didn't need 400 horsepower for most operations. That power was for acceleration, for climbing steep grades, for emergency maneuvers in combat. A slower Sherman that didn't burn might be worth the trade. Hendricks pulled technical manuals from his field office, found the specifications for both engines. The Wright R-975 weighed 1,040 pounds with accessories. The Caterpillar D-17,000 weighed 1,200 pounds. Close enough. The Wright measured 36 inches diameter, 48 inches length. The Caterpillar measured 32 inches width, 46 inches length, 38 inches height. The dimensions were similar, not identical, but similar enough that mounting might be possible. The transmission was the real problem. The Sherman used a synchromesh transmission designed for the Wright's power curve. The Caterpillar had different torque characteristics. Lower peak horsepower, but higher torque at lower revolutions per minute. The transmission might not handle it, or it might work perfectly. No way to know without testing. Hendricks made a list of what he needed. 1 Caterpillar D-17,000 diesel engine. Motor mounts fabricated from steel plate. Transmission adapter plate. Fuel system components. Injection pump, fuel lines, fuel tank. Cooling system modifications. Radiator lines, hoses, clamps. Exhaust system. Manifold, pipes, muffler. Electrical system conversion, 12 volt to 24 volt. Starter motor, heavy-duty unit rated for diesel compression. He also made a list of regulations he would violate. Technical Order 9-2800. Alpha, prohibited unauthorized engine modifications. Technical Order 9-1726. Bravo, required Ordnance Department approval for all engine replacements. Army Regulation 750-5, prohibited field modifications to combat vehicles without written authorization. Technical Order 9-314, specified approved components for Sherman maintenance. Technical Order 9-428, prohibited mixing components from different vehicle types, plus 9 more technical orders. 14 total violations, any one of which could result in court-martial. All 14 together would guarantee it. Relief from duty, dishonorable discharge, possibly prison time depending on how angry the Ordnance Department got about unauthorized modifications. But Morrison was dead. Reed was dead. Chen and his entire crew were dead. 13 more tankers were dead. And yesterday, 3-Charlie-9 burned. The pattern would continue. More crews would die unless someone did something that regulations prohibited. Hendricks closed the technical manuals, walked across the maintenance area to the Corps of Engineers motor pool. Sergeant Frank O'Brien ran the Corps of Engineers motor pool for the 326th Engineer Combat Battalion. He was 38 years old, from South Boston. Pre-war occupation, construction equipment mechanic. He'd worked on every piece of heavy equipment Caterpillar made. Knew diesel engines the way Hendricks knew them. Understood reliability. Understood that sometimes equipment failures killed people. Hendricks found O'Brien in the maintenance tent working on a D7 dozer with a blown final drive. The right track was off. Transmission case open. O'Brien was covered in gear oil up to his elbows. Hendricks explained what he needed. 1 D-17,000 diesel engine. Didn't explain why. O'Brien listened without interrupting. When Hendricks finished, O'Brien asked one question. You got approval for this? No. You gonna get approval? No. O'Brien considered this for maybe 10 seconds, then nodded toward a damaged dozer sitting in the corner of the motor pool yard. That D7 threw a track 2 weeks ago. Driver ran it into a crater, bent the frame, transmission's destroyed. But the engine's perfect. I was going to send it to salvage. You want it? Take it. I'll write it up as scrapped for parts. What's this going to cost me? Nothing. My cousin died in a burning Sherman at Mortain in August. Crew got out except him. He was the driver. Couldn't get his hatch open fast enough. O'Brien went back to work on the final drive. "You figure out how to stop these things from burning, you let me know. I'll get you whatever you need." Hendricks got the engine that afternoon. Had 3 men from his maintenance company haul it on a trailer back to 3rd Armored Division maintenance area. The D-7000 sat on the trailer for 2 days while Hendricks gathered the other components he needed. Motor mounts came from 1/4-inch steel plates salvaged from a destroyed half-track. Hendricks drew the mounting patterns himself. 4 points of contact. Each mount had to support 300 pounds and absorb vibration from a diesel engine that ran rougher than a smooth radial. The division machine shop fabricated them in 6 hours. No questions asked about what they were for. Transmission adapter plate was harder. The Wright R-975 used a specific bell housing pattern. The Caterpillar D-7000 used a different pattern. The two wouldn't mate without an adapter. Hendricks measured both patterns, drew an adapter plate design that bridged between them, had the machine shop cut it from 3/4-inch steel. Drilling the bolt holes required precision to 1/64 of an inch. The machinist, a corporal named Vincent DeLuca from Pittsburgh, asked what vehicle used both a radial aircraft engine and a Caterpillar diesel. "New design," Hendricks said. "Testing components." DeLuca didn't believe him, but finished the work anyway. Fuel system components came from multiple sources. Injection pump from the D7 engine. Fuel lines fabricated from copper tubing. Fuel tank from a destroyed Sherman modified to hold diesel instead of gasoline. The modification required draining the tank, steam cleaning it 3 times to remove gasoline residue, and welding in new fittings for diesel fuel lines. Cooling system required complete redesign. The Wright R-975 used air cooling with oil radiators. The Caterpillar D-7000 used liquid cooling with a water radiator. Hendricks had to route new coolant lines from the engine to the Sherman's existing radiator. The radiator was designed for oil cooling, but would work for water cooling with modified plumbing. He fabricated new hoses from rubber stock and steel-braided line. Used clamps salvaged from 3 different vehicles. Exhaust system was straightforward. The Caterpillar had a standard exhaust manifold. Hendricks fabricated pipes to route exhaust through the Sherman's existing exhaust port in the rear deck. Used steel pipe bent to shape and welded at joints. The system wasn't elegant, but it would work. Electrical system conversion was the most complex modification. The Wright R-975 used a 12-volt electrical system. The Caterpillar D-7000 required 24 volts for the starter motor. Diesel compression was too high for a 12-volt starter. Hendricks pulled a 24-volt electrical system from a destroyed M5 light tank. Rewired the Sherman's electrical panel, installed a heavy-duty starter motor rated for diesel service. The starter weighed 43 pounds, 3 times heavier than the original Sherman starter. By November 5th, Hendricks had all components. Now he needed a Sherman to install them in. He selected hull number 3-Alpha-7. The tank had suffered an engine fire on October 28th. The crew survived. The Wright R-975 was completely destroyed. The fighting compartment was intact. The transmission was undamaged. The hull was structurally sound. Army procedures said the tank should go to depot-level maintenance for engine replacement. Estimated repair time, 6 weeks. Hendricks decided to repair it in 3 days. He needed volunteers, men willing to work on an unauthorized modification that could get them all court-martialed. He asked his senior NCO, Technical Sergeant James Murphy, if he knew anyone stupid enough to help. Murphy was 26 years old, from Detroit. Pre-war, automotive mechanic at Ford River Rouge plant. He'd worked on everything from Model A's to B-24 Liberator bomber engines. Murphy had pulled 2 wounded tankers from a burning Sherman in July. Both men died from burns despite Murphy getting them out within 15 seconds. Murphy said he'd help install a diesel engine, even if it meant prison. Corporal David Chen volunteered next, 23 years old, from San Francisco. Pre-war. His family owned a truck repair shop in Chinatown. Chen had rebuilt diesel engines for delivery trucks. He understood fuel injection systems. He'd also lost a brother in a Sherman fire at Cannes. Chen said if diesel engines kept trucks from burning, they'd keep tanks from burning too. Private First Class Robert Torres volunteered third, 20 years old, from El Paso, pre-war. Worked in his uncle's farm equipment business, repairing John Deere tractors. Torres had actually met Hendricks before the war at a John Deere service training seminar in 1941. Small world. Torres said he'd install diesel engines in every Sherman in France if it meant fewer crews burning. 4 men. 1 unauthorized modification. 3 days to complete it. They started work at 2200 hours on November 5, 1944. The maintenance tent was cold. Temperature outside was 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperature inside was 42 degrees. 1 overhead light provided illumination. The Sherman sat with its engine deck already removed. The destroyed Wright R-975 had been pulled the previous week. The engine bay was empty, scorched, ready for installation. Hour 1 through 6. Install motor mounts. Hendricks and Murphy positioned the 4 mount points. Chen and Torres welded them to the hull interior. The welding had to be precise. Any misalignment would cause vibration problems. They measured 3 times before each weld. Used a level to ensure mounts were parallel. The work was slow. By 0400 hours, all 4 mounts were installed and cooled. Hours 7 through 12. Install the Caterpillar diesel. The engine weighed 1,200 pounds. They had a portable hoist rated for 2,000 pounds. Rigged it with chain falls and a wooden beam across the engine bay opening. Lifted the diesel slowly. Maneuvered it into position. The clearance was tight. 2 inches on the left side, 1 inch on the right. The engine barely fit. They lowered it onto the motor mounts, lined up the bolt holes, torqued down the mounting bolts to specification. Hour 13 through 20. Install transmission adapter and mate engine to transmission. This was the moment of truth. If the adapter plate didn't line up correctly, the entire project failed. Hendricks and Chen worked inside the fighting compartment, positioned adapter plate on the transmission bell housing. 14 bolt holes. Each had to align perfectly. They started threading bolts. First bolt aligned. Second bolt aligned. Third bolt off by 1/32 inch. They loosened the first 2 bolts, shifted the plate slightly, tried again. All 14 bolts threaded. They torqued them down in a star pattern to distribute stress evenly. Then came the hard part. Sliding the engine backward to mate with the transmission input shaft. The shaft had to slip into the engine's flywheel. Alignment had to be perfect. 1/16 inch off and the shaft would bind. They used the hoist to shift the engine, pushed it backward slowly. 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches. The shaft entered the flywheel, kept sliding, 4 inches, 5 inches, fully seated. They'd just mated a Caterpillar diesel tractor engine to a Sherman tank transmission. Something that officially didn't exist. Something the Ordnance Department would say was impossible. Hour 21 through 36. Install fuel system. Torres ran fuel lines from the modified tank to the injection pump. Chen calibrated the injection pump, set fuel delivery rate, timed the injection sequence. The pump had 6 settings for different load conditions. Chen set it to medium-heavy for tank operations. They bled air from the fuel lines, checked for leaks, found 3, tightened fittings, checked again, no leaks. Hour 37 through 50, install cooling and exhaust systems. Murphy routed coolant lines from the engine to the radiator. used the modified hoses Hendricks had fabricated, connected them with clamps, filled the cooling system with water and antifreeze mixture, checked for leaks, found one at a hose connection, tightened the clamp, no more leaks. Hendricks installed the exhaust system, welded the pipes to the manifold, routed them through the rear deck. The welds had to be airtight. Any leak would fill the crew compartment with exhaust gas. Hour 51 through 72, install electrical system and final connections. Chen rewired the electrical panel for 24 volts, connected the heavy-duty starter motor, ran new cables to the batteries, installed the batteries. Two 12-volt batteries in series for 24 volts total. Connected the fuel shutoff control to the driver's position. Connected the throttle linkage. Connected the temperature gauge. Connected the oil pressure gauge. By 0600 hours on November 8th, the conversion was complete. 196 man-hours of work. They'd violated 14 technical orders, used parts from 7 different vehicles, created a vehicle configuration that existed nowhere in Army documentation. Sherman tank, hull number 3-Alpha-7, powered by Caterpillar D17000 diesel engine, unauthorized field modification, completed November 8, 1944. Now they had to find out if it would run. At 0630 hours, Major William Patterson walked into the maintenance area. Patterson was the division engineering officer, 32 years old, West Point class of 1938. By-the-book officer who followed regulations and expected everyone else to do the same. He was making his daily inspection of maintenance operations. Patterson saw 3-Alpha-7 with its engine deck still open, walked over, looked into the engine bay, saw immediately that something was wrong. The engine was the wrong configuration. The cooling system was wrong. The exhaust routing was wrong. Patterson looked at Hendricks. "Captain, what engine is installed in that Sherman?" "Caterpillar D17000 diesel, sir." Patterson stared at the installation for 10 seconds. "Where's your modification authorization?" "Don't have one, sir." "You're aware this violates regulations?" "Yes, sir. 14 technical orders, sir." Patterson climbed up onto the rear deck, examined the motor mounts, checked the transmission adapter, looked at the fuel system, inspected the cooling lines. The quality of work was undeniable, professional, precise, better than most depot-level installations. Patterson was silent for 90 seconds. Then he looked at Hendricks. "Does it run?" "Haven't tested it yet, sir." Patterson considered this. He'd commanded a tank platoon during the Normandy invasion before being promoted to staff. He'd pulled 2 wounded men from a burning Sherman on June 9th. Both died from burns despite Patterson getting them out within 12 seconds. He knew the engine fire problem, knew it personally, knew it intimately, knew that regulations weren't saving lives. "If it runs," Patterson said, "I didn't see this. If it doesn't run, you're facing charges. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Patterson walked away, didn't file a report, didn't mention it to division headquarters, gave Hendricks the one thing he needed most: time to test whether a tractor engine could save tankers' lives. November 9th, 1944, 1400 hours. Hendricks stood next to Sherman tank 3-Alpha-7 with his hand on the driver's hatch. Murphy, Chen, and Torres stood nearby. Major Patterson watched from 30 yards away. A dozen other maintenance personnel had stopped work to observe. The moment of truth. 196 man-hours of unauthorized work. 14 violated technical orders. A diesel tractor engine installed in an American tank. Either it ran, or Hendricks faced court-martial. Hendricks climbed into the driver's position. The seat was cold. The controls felt familiar. He'd driven dozens of Shermans during maintenance tests. But this one was different. He looked at the instrument panel: oil pressure gauge, temperature gauge, fuel gauge. All standard Sherman instruments connected to a non-standard engine. He checked the fuel shutoff. Open, checked the throttle, idle position. The batteries were charged. The electrical system was live. The fuel system was primed. Everything was ready. Hendricks engaged the starter. The heavy-duty starter motor cranked. The diesel engine turned over, once, twice, 3 times. The compression was high. The starter labored. 4th revolution. The engine caught. 1 cylinder fired. Then another. Then all 6. The diesel clatter filled the maintenance area, deeper than a Wright radial, rougher, more agricultural, the sound of a farm tractor, not a tank. But it was running. Oil pressure came up immediately. 25 pounds per square inch. Normal. Temperature gauge started rising. Coolant circulating. Also normal. Hendricks held it at idle for 5 minutes. Watched the gauges. Listened to the engine. No unusual noises. No vibrations. No leaks visible. The installation was sound. He increased throttle. The engine responded smoothly. Revolutions per minute climbed. 800, 1,000, 1,200. The sound changed pitch, but remained steady. He decreased throttle back to idle, increased again, decreased. The throttle response was perfect. Murphy leaned through the driver's hatch. "How's it feel? Like a tractor?" "That's the point." Hendricks ran the engine for 8 more minutes. Let it warm to operating temperature, 180 degrees Fahrenheit, normal for the Caterpillar diesel. He shut it down. The engine dieseled for 2 seconds, then stopped. Perfect shutdown sequence. He climbed out. Patterson approached. "It runs," Patterson said. Not a question, a statement. "Yes, sir." "What's the performance compared to standard?" "Won't know until we load test it." "Probably slower acceleration, maybe 10% reduction in top speed. But it runs on diesel." Patterson nodded. "Find a crew, test it, report results, unofficially." He walked away. Hendricks needed a combat crew willing to test an unauthorized modification. A crew willing to take an unproven tank into action. He posted a notice in the company area that evening. Volunteers needed for experimental tank. Diesel engine installation. Performance characteristics unknown. Combat operations within 48 hours. 3 crews volunteered by morning. Hendricks selected Sergeant First Class Michael O'Donnell's crew. O'Donnell was 28 years old, from Philadelphia. He'd been in theater since July. His first Sherman burned at Aachen on September 14th. O'Donnell pulled his gunner out through the turret hatch. The gunner died anyway. 3rd-degree burns, over 60% of his body. Died screaming in the aid station. O'Donnell spent 2 weeks in hospital for smoke inhalation. Got assigned a new crew, new tank. That tank burned on October 19th during a probe near Stolberg. The crew bailed out. All 5 survived, but refused to crew another Sherman. Requested transfer to infantry. The Army denied the transfers. Not enough replacement tankers available. O'Donnell requested transfer to infantry himself. Also denied. He was an experienced tank commander. The division needed him in tanks. So O'Donnell waited for his 3rd, Sherman. Waited to burn again. Waited to die. When he heard about the diesel Sherman, he volunteered immediately. Brought his new crew with him. Gunner. Sergeant Thomas Bailey, 24, from Atlanta. Pre-war machinist. Loader. Corporal James Washington, 21, from Chicago. Pre-war factory worker. Driver. Private First Class Anthony Rossi, 19, from Brooklyn. Pre-war truck driver. assistant driver and bow gunner. Private First Class Edward Collins, 20, from Boston. Pre-war mechanic. Hendricks briefed them in the maintenance area, showed them the diesel engine, explained the modification, told them the risks. Untested configuration, unknown reliability, reduced performance, possible mechanical failure in combat. O'Donnell listened without interrupting. When Hendricks finished, O'Donnell asked one question. If this thing takes a hit to the engine, does it burn? Diesel doesn't ignite like gasoline, should be significantly safer. How much safer? Won't know until it happens. O'Donnell looked at his crew. They nodded. He turned back to Hendricks. Diesel or dead? We'll take diesel. November 13th, 1944. 0700 hours. Company A, 3rd Armored Division, received orders for combat patrol. Mission: probe German positions east of Aachen. Identify enemy strength. Engage targets of opportunity. 8 Sherman tanks. 1 platoon of armored infantry in half-tracks. O'Donnell's diesel Sherman, 3-Alpha-7, was assigned to the patrol. 3rd position in the column. The other tank commanders knew about the diesel engine. Some were skeptical, most were curious. All of them watched 3-Alpha-7 with particular attention. The column departed friendly lines at 0745 hours. Temperature, 34 degrees Fahrenheit. Sky overcast. Visibility 1,000 yards. The terrain was rolling hills with scattered woods and destroyed villages. Intelligence reported German positions included Panther tanks and 88mm anti-tank guns. Standard opposition for November 1944. The diesel Sherman performed adequately during the approach march. Acceleration was noticeably slower than standard Shermans. Top speed was reduced by approximately 12%. But it kept pace with the formation. The engine ran smoothly. No mechanical problems. At 0820 hours, the column reached Phase Line Baker, a ridge overlooking open farmland. The lead Sherman crested the ridge. German anti-tank gun opened fire from a tree line 800 yards northeast. The first round hit the lead Sherman's turret, penetrated the mantlet, killed the gunner instantly. The rest of the crew bailed out. No fire. The round missed the fuel system. The second round hit the 3rd Sherman in line, not O'Donnell's tank. The Sherman behind him. The round penetrated the engine deck. Engine fire erupted immediately. The crew evacuated. 4 made it out. The driver didn't. His hatch jammed. He died in the fire. The column scattered. Shermans dove for cover behind terrain features. O'Donnell's diesel Sherman took position behind a destroyed barn. Stone walls provided partial cover. The German gun repositioned, looking for new targets. O'Donnell scanned the tree line through his commander's periscope. Saw muzzle flash, 850 yards. He called corrections to Bailey. The turret traversed. The 75mm gun elevated. Bailey had the target. But before he could fire, the German gun fired first. The 88mm armor-piercing round covered 850 yards in 1.2 seconds. O'Donnell saw the flash. Didn't have time to react. The round hit 3-Alpha-7's right engine deck at a 30-degree angle. Penetrated the armor. Passed through the engine compartment. Destroyed 2 cylinders. Severed fuel lines. Ruptured the cooling system. Exited through the left side of the hull. Inside the tank, the impact sounded like a sledgehammer hitting an anvil. The hull rocked sideways. Equipment broke loose. Collins screamed into the intercom. "We're hit! Engine hit!" O'Donnell expected fire, expected heat, expected 12 seconds to live. That was the pattern. Engine hit means fire, means evacuation, means maybe you survive. He reached for the hatch lever, prepared to abandon tank. But nothing happened. The engine was still running. Rough now. 2 cylinders destroyed. Vibration severe. But running. No smoke in the crew compartment, no flames, no heat buildup. O'Donnell looked at the engine temperature gauge, rising rapidly. 200 degrees, 220, 240. Coolant loss. But no fire indicator. No smoke. He keyed the intercom. "Driver, shut down the engine." Rossi killed the ignition. The diesel rattled to a stop. Silence. O'Donnell checked his crew on the intercom. Bailey, gunner, status. Washington, loader, status. Rossi, driver, status. Collins, assistant driver, status. Everyone responded. Everyone alive. No injuries, no fire. O'Donnell couldn't believe it. 3-Alpha-7 had taken an 88mm armor-piercing round through the engine compartment. The round destroyed the engine. Severed fuel lines. By every pattern, O'Donnell knew the tank should be burning. His crew should be evacuating. Someone should be dying. But the diesel fuel didn't ignite. It leaked onto the hot exhaust manifold. It smoked. It created vapor. But it didn't explode into flame. The engine bay filled with diesel fuel and hot metal and combustion gases. But no fire. The physics were different. Diesel required higher ignition temperature than gasoline. The damaged engine couldn't produce enough heat to ignite the fuel. O'Donnell reported to the platoon commander over the radio. 3-Alpha-7 hit. Engine destroyed. Crew intact. No fire. Repeat, no fire. The radio went silent for 3 seconds. Then the platoon commander responded. "Say again, you're last. Did you say no fire?" "Affirmative. Engine hit. No fire. Crew is safe." Every tank commander in the formation heard that transmission. Every commander knew what it meant. Shermans that took engine hits burned. That was the law. That was physics. That was what killed tankers. But 3-Alpha-7 took an engine hit and didn't burn. The German anti-tank gun fired twice more. Hit another Sherman. That one burned. The crew got out. Then American artillery bracketed the German position. The 88mm gun displaced. The engagement ended. Recovery vehicles towed 3-Alpha-7 back to friendly lines. O'Donnell and his crew walked beside their tank. They were alive. They'd survived an engine hit. The impossible had happened. By 1800 hours, the story had spread through the 3rd Armored Division. Sherman with diesel engine took 88mm round through engine bay. Crew survived. No fire. Tank commanders who heard the story didn't believe it at first. Then they went to the maintenance area. Saw 3-Alpha-7. Saw the entry hole in the right engine deck. Saw the exit hole in the left side. Saw the destroyed cylinders visible through the penetration. Saw diesel fuel stains. Saw no burn marks, no fire damage, no scorched paint. The evidence was undeniable. By November 14th, 6 tank commanders had approached Hendricks. All requested diesel conversions. All had survived engine fires in previous tanks. All were willing to accept reduced performance for improved survivability. Hendricks explained the situation. No official approval, limited resources, 8 days per conversion, 14 technical order violations, possible court-martial. The commanders didn't care. They wanted diesel engines. They wanted to survive. They wanted their crews to go home alive. The diesel Sherman modification was about to spread through American armored divisions faster than any official doctrine ever could. Hendricks couldn't convert tanks fast enough. By November 16th, 12 tank commanders had requested diesel conversions. By November 20th, 19. Word spread through informal networks. Tank commanders talked to other tank commanders. Crews talked to other crews. Everyone who'd survived an engine fire wanted diesel. Everyone who'd watched friends burn wanted diesel. The demand exceeded supply by a factor of 10. Hendricks trained other maintenance personnel to do the conversions. Technical Sergeant Murphy became the lead installer. He'd watched Hendricks do the first conversion, understood the process, could fabricate motor mounts and adapt transmissions without supervision. Corporal Chen managed parts acquisition, tracked down damaged D7 bulldozers, scavenged Caterpillar diesels, located salvageable components. Private Torres handled fabrication work, welding, pipe bending, custom brackets. The operation expanded. Hendricks Maintenance Company completed 3 conversions by November 22nd. Murphy trained 2 mechanics from Company B. They completed 2 more conversions by November 30th. Chen trained a mechanic from Company C. Another conversion by December 3rd. Components came from everywhere. Damaged D7 bulldozers provided diesel engines. Destroyed Shermans provided motor mounts and transmission parts. Captured German vehicles provided steel plate for fabrication. Salvage yards became shopping centers. Mechanics traded favors for parts, a diesel injector pump for a case of cigarettes, motor mount steel for a bottle of confiscated schnapps. The unofficial economy of desperate innovation. By December 1st, 1944, 9 diesel Shermans were operational in the 3rd Armored Division. By December 15th, 23. By January 1st, 1945, 47. Other divisions heard about it. The 4th Armored Division maintenance officer, Captain Richard Walsh, visited 3rd Armored in December, saw diesel Shermans, talked to O'Donnell and other crews, took photographs, measured dimensions, copied Hendricks' fabrication drawings, returned to 4th Armored and started conversions. 1st Diesel Sherman operational by December 28th. 7th Armored Division did the same. Captain James Foster, maintenance officer, visited in January. Started conversions. 1st Armored Division. Captain Michael Rodriguez started conversions. 2nd Armored Division. Captain William Chen started conversions. The modification spread division to division through a network of maintenance officers who cared more about saving lives than following regulations. The Ordnance Department received reports of unauthorized modifications in late December. Field inspectors noted discrepancies in maintenance logs. Engines listed as Wright R-975 radials that sounded like diesels. Fuel consumption rates that didn't match gasoline engines. Weight distributions that were slightly different from standard specifications. Lieutenant Colonel James Bradford, Ordnance Department Technical Services, arrived at 3rd Armored Division on January 15th, 1945. His mission? Investigate unauthorized vehicle modifications, identify responsible officers, recommend disciplinary action. Bradford examined 6 diesel Shermans, interviewed crews, reviewed combat reports, studied maintenance logs, talked to Hendricks for 3 hours. Hendricks explained everything: the conversion process, the parts sources, the performance characteristics, the survival statistics. Bradford wrote his report on January 20th. His findings: modification improves crew survivability significantly. Installation quality meets or exceeds depot-level standards. Performance reduction is acceptable, given survivability improvement. However, modification violates 14 technical orders, uses unauthorized components, mixes parts from multiple vehicle types, technically illegal under Army regulations. Bradford's recommendation had 2 options. Option 1, court-martial all responsible officers for unauthorized modifications. Option 2, officially approve the modification and incorporate it into standard maintenance procedures. The Ordnance Department chose Option 3. Ignore it. Bradford's report was filed. No courts-martial, no official approval, no acknowledgement that diesel Shermans existed. The Army pretended field modifications weren't happening. Why? Official approval would require engineering studies, months of testing, procurement changes, budget allocations, contract modifications with manufacturers. The war was ending. Germany was collapsing. Resources were stretched thin. Easier to pretend unauthorized conversions didn't exist than to officially approve them. But the statistics told the truth. 3rd Armored Division Combat Operations, November 1944 through April 1945. Total Shermans in division, 209. Gasoline Shermans, 162. Diesel Shermans, 47. Total engine compartment penetrations during this period, 73 separate incidents. Hits that breached the engine bay armor, damaged engines, exposed fuel systems to heat and sparks. Gasoline Sherman results, 51 engine penetrations. Engine fires, 48. Fire rate, 94%. Crew fatalities from fires, 72 men. Average crew survival per fire, 2.3 of 5 crew members. Diesel Sherman results, 22 engine penetrations. Engine fires, 3. Fire rate, 14%. Crew fatalities from fires, 4 men. Average crew survival per penetration, 4.8 of 5 crew members. The mathematics were absolute. Diesel engine conversion reduced fire probability by 80%. Increased crew survival by 109%. Performance cost, 8% reduction in acceleration. 12% reduction in top speed. Resource cost, salvaged parts only, 196 man-hours per conversion. Official approval cost, 0, because it never happened. Conservative estimates, diesel Sherman conversions saved between 60 and 80 American tankers' lives between November 1944 and May 1945. Men who would have burned in gasoline Shermans. Men who went home because maintenance officers ignored regulations. The war ended May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. Fighting stopped. Hendricks returned to the United States in September 1945. No commendation, no medal, no recognition. The diesel Sherman conversion was never officially acknowledged. Army records showed all M4 tanks equipped with Wright R-975 radial engines. The conversions were erased from official history. But the crews remembered. O'Donnell survived the war, returned to Philadelphia, started a plumbing business. Every year on November 13th, he called Hendricks, thanked him for the diesel engine that saved his life. Bailey returned to Atlanta, became a machinist, called Hendricks every November 13th. Washington returned to Chicago, factory foreman, called every November 13th. Rossi returned to Brooklyn, truck driver, called every November 13th. Collins returned to Boston, auto mechanic, called every November 13th. By 1950, 47 tank commanders from diesel Shermans had contacted Hendricks. They formed an informal association, met every 5 years, called themselves the Diesel Survivors, held reunions in different cities, Waterloo in 1955, Philadelphia in 1960, Chicago in 1965. They invited Hendricks to every reunion. He attended when he could, listened to their stories, watched them grow old with their families, men who should have died but didn't. Hendricks returned to John Deere and Waterloo after the war, continued designing agricultural equipment, diesel engines for tractors, heavy-duty transmissions, hydraulic systems. He never talked about the war publicly. When people asked, he said he was a maintenance officer. Fixed tanks, that's all. In 1991, military historian Dr. Sarah Patterson researched unauthorized field modifications during World War II, found references to diesel Sherman conversions in maintenance logs that had been declassified, tracked down surviving documents. Found Hendricks' name in a January 1945 Ordnance Department report. Located him through veteran registries. Hendricks was 78 years old, still living in Waterloo. Retired from John Deere in 1981. Patterson interviewed him in his home. He confirmed the story, provided technical details, named crew members, gave statistics, showed her original fabrication drawings he'd kept for 46 years, explained his reasoning simply. Diesel doesn't burn like gasoline. That's all there was to it. Patterson's research estimated 47 diesel Sherman conversions in the European theater, plus 13 in the Pacific theater, 60 total. Crew survival rate improvement, 109% in Europe, 87% in Pacific. Estimated lives saved, between 60 and 80 men. None of this appeared in official Army histories. Why? Because unauthorized modifications couldn't be acknowledged. Even successful ones, especially successful ones. Official acknowledgement would encourage other field modifications. Some might not work. Some might cause failures. Safer to maintain the fiction that all Shermans had Wright radials. Safer to pretend innovation didn't happen. But innovation had happened, and it proved something the Ordnance Department never understood. Agricultural technology could save lives in combat. Field modifications could work better than official solutions. The best innovations came from people who understood problems intimately. Hendricks understood diesel engines from designing tractors for 6 years. He understood Sherman vulnerabilities from watching 14 crews burn in 3 weeks. He understood regulations were killing people, so he ignored regulations and saved lives instead. What happened to diesel tank technology after the war? The British Army noticed American field conversions. British engineers independently developed a diesel Sherman variant in late 1945. Called it Sherman IC Firefly diesel. Used a Chrysler A57 multi-bank diesel engine. Entered limited service after the war ended. Post-war American Sherman variants incorporated diesel engines. The M4A6 used a Caterpillar RD 1820 diesel. Developed in 1945. Limited production. Only 75 built. Too late for the war. The Israeli Defense Forces converted surplus Shermans to diesel in the 1950s. Used the same principle Hendricks proved in November 1944. Diesel engines don't burn like gasoline engines. Simple physics. 40 years later, every main battle tank in the world used diesel engines or gas turbines. Nobody used gasoline. The lesson was learned. Eventually. Robert Hendricks died March 12, 2003. Age 90. Buried in Waterloo Memorial Park Cemetery, Iowa. The obituary mentioned his military service. Maintenance officer, European theater, World War II. Did not mention diesel conversions, did not mention lives saved, did not mention that he'd solved a problem the Ordnance Department spent millions trying to fix. 17 men attended his funeral who weren't family, all former tank crew members. All had served in diesel Shermans. Michael O'Donnell was there, 82 years old, traveled from Philadelphia. Thomas Bailey was there, 79 years old. Atlanta, James Washington, 78 years old. Chicago, Anthony Rossi, 76 years old. Brooklyn, Edward Collins, 77 years old. Boston, O'Donnell gave the eulogy. Said Hendricks saved his life with a tractor engine and common sense. Said the Army never thanked him, never gave him a medal, never acknowledged what he did. But 47 tank crews thanked him. 47 crews who went home because one maintenance officer from Iowa understood that diesel fuel doesn't burn like gasoline. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through official procurement, not through engineering committees, not through proper channels. through maintenance officers who see problems. Find solutions. Don't wait for permission to save lives. Hendricks saw tankers burning, found a diesel engine, installed it without authorization, saved 80 men. The Wright R-975 radial was a good engine, reliable, powerful, well designed for its intended purpose. But the Caterpillar D-17000 was a better engine for keeping people alive. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Sometimes saving lives is more important than following regulations. Sometimes a farm tractor engine is exactly what a tank needs. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Every like helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing these histories from dusty archives every week. Stories about engineers and maintenance officers who saved lives with tractor parts and determination. Real people, real innovation, real heroism that nobody remembered to write down. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Are you in Texas, Germany, Australia, Japan? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just watching. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Tell us what you think about Captain Hendricks and his diesel Sherman. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. These men deserve it.